Did you recently download the game of Town of Salem 2 and are wondering how to play? Or maybe you've played a few games but don't know why you keep getting voted up the stand and guiltied even though you have done nothing wrong. Well, welcome to the ultimate town guide to Town of Salem 2. So as an introduction, why am I making this guide? I think Town of Salem is a dying genre, and social deduction games is not as popular as it used to be. And I think part of the reason why that Town of Salem 2 is dying is because it's really hard for new players to learn the game. It takes a lot of time to understand the rules, mechanics, as well as all the hidden metas of how existing players already do things. And this is from a game I played today, which was part of the reason that inspired me to make this video, is when I died, and then a town member was saying, "Oh, how am I supposed to play this game? This was my first match." It made me think about how there's really a lack of infrastructure for new players to learn this complicated game. To introduce more about me, hi, my name is Holly, and I have a YouTube channel for Town of Salem. I mostly played Town of Salem 1 back in the day, and I was ranked number 4 globally for Town of Salem 1 in terms of my elo. So you can tell that I grinded a lot and I kind of had no life during the 2020 era. And I recently tried to pick up Town of Salem 2, and picking up this game has made me realize that it is extremely difficult. And without further ado, let's get into each element. So first, let's talk about town investigative roles. So if you get a town investigative role like, for example, the seer, the spy, the coroner, the lookout, you are town's leaders. Town investigative roles are the only roles in Town of Salem 2 that cannot be guessed by the doomsayer and ritualist. What does that mean? So the doomsayer and ritualist are evil roles who can guess town roles. And for example, the doomsayer, if they guess your exact role, then they can doom you and you'll die the next day. And ritualist, if they guess your exact role, then you would also die. But if you are a town investigative role, then you're actually immune to being guessed and you cannot be guessed. In the early game, only your full claim is known to the town because you don't have to be fearful of the doomsayer or ritualist. So I think you should be leading votes as town investigatives. Now let's talk about posting results as a TI or town investigative. You should post your results to town at the start of every day. Even if you don't think you found anything useful, you should still post. Like for example, if you are a lookout who was on 3 but no one visited 3, you should still post that result to the town. This also applies to roles like spies or coroners, where for a spy, you may have bugged someone but you didn't get any results. You could say, "Oh, I bugged someone and I'm the spy. I will post results when I get some." Or, "Coroner, I didn't do anything night 1, but I'm still gonna tell the town I'm a coroner." Because if you don't post your results right away at the start of the day, you run the risk of looking very suspicious to the rest of the townies. This is because it is very easy for evil roles in Town of Salem 2 to fake town investigative roles. So in order to make yourself more credible, you should just say your role and share your results. Okay, so that's basically it for town investigatives, and now let's talk about the voting phase, which is the most important part for a town member. Like, as town, you need to exercise your right to vote. During the daytime phase, you have 45 seconds to discuss, and then there's a 30-second voting phase. That's when you can vote people up the stand and choose whether to vote innocent or guilty on them. Usually during this time, if a town investigative role has a lead already, like for example, a sheriff has found someone as suspicious, then you can choose to vote between that TI and who they are accusing. However, there are times where none of the town investigators found any meaningful results, and in that case, you should proceed to VFA. So what does VFA stand for? VFA stands for Vote for Alignment, and this is when, if there's no leads during a day, then players will start voting others up to get their alignment. And this usually starts from player 1 all the way down to player 15. So looking at here, if you are in this town, you would usually start from player 1 and then go down to 2, 3, 4, 5, and skip anyone who has claimed before the vote for alignment phase. But let's look more deeply at what an alignment is, and basically is just asking you what subtype of town you are. So this goes from town investigatives. These are what we covered, responsible for finding evils and searching their house for any wrongdoings. Town protectives are town who protect other town and save them from being killed. Town killing is a town who has some kind of killing power and can kind of take justice into their own hands. Town support is a town who doesn't necessarily do any investigation, protecting, or killing, but they support the rest of the town with their abilities. Town power is the most powerful type of town, and their abilities often change the course of the game and affect it very much. So next, now that we know about alignments, let's talk about why we're claiming alignments here and not just full claiming. If you have played Town of Salem 1 before, then you're probably very used to full claiming and the term VFR, which is vote for role, instead of VFA, vote for alignment. In fact, in Town of Salem 2, full claiming as a non-TI role can be seen as suspicious if you're kind of doing it for no reason. Then people would wonder why you're not afraid of being guessed by the doomsayer or ritualist. However, it is important to note that there are circumstances where you should full claim and say your full role and provide your will. This is usually if you are being directly accused, you are under suspicion, or you need town to know your real role. For example, you're a jailer who is getting witched. There's also a related term called vote for time. So vote for time, VFT, stands for voting someone up the stand to get more time for town to discuss. So you're kind of voting them up even though you might have already known their alignment, or even if they don't seem suspicious. Because normally during the day, discussion is 45 seconds, voting is only 30 seconds. It's not actually that much time to think and make a decision on who to guilty. So by voting up someone on the stand for time, if town is being really indecisive, then you add 20 seconds of defense phase and 20 seconds of judgment phase into the town's day. So town has more time to actually make a decision. Because town always starts the game with 3 trials, that means, in theory, you can get 120 extra seconds in your day for town to think things through and make a final decision of who to hang. Next, let's talk about voting innocent or voting guilty. In special cases, like if someone is up the stand, they seem clearly evil, but a deputy prosecutor or marshal comes out and says, this down, I want to use my ability. Then you can just vote innocent and let them use their ability. This is because these 3 roles, the deputy, prosecutor, and marshal, have the ability to increase the town's trials on that day by 1, so that instead of hanging just 1 person, you can hang 2 people. Otherwise, in most cases, just trust your gut on whether you want to vote inno or guilty. If you don't know, it's totally okay to abstain because if later someone asks you to justify a vote you voted guilty on or innocent on, and you don't really know why you voted guilty or innocent, you're gonna seem kind of suspicious for not knowing why you're voting a certain way. Ideally, you should be guiltying a known evil or suspicious player on your last trial, so on your 3rd trial. This is so town gets the most discussion time. However, let's say town found a known evil and you don't really trust that town will actually hang this evil on the last trial, you should just vote them up and guilty them. So next, let's talk about the marshal. So yeah, I know there's a lot of things about voting, but something special about voting in Town of Salem 2 happens when there is a tribunal. And what is a tribunal? This is caused by the marshal role. And when there's a tribunal, town will have 2 trials to lynch someone during that day. As soon as a tribunal starts, the voting time of town increases to 60 seconds, and anyone who gets voted up the stand during a tribunal will die. People don't even vote inno or guilty, they automatically die. If, let's say, there's no leads during that day, and a marshal randomly decides to start a tribunal, town should not blindly vote. So if you're a member of the town, you should pause and actually think carefully before you vote. And let's say votes are piling up on someone, you should not just blindly vote up that person, because once you do, there's kind of no turning back. At this time during a tribunal, there's going to be super tense music, and it's going to sound like, oh, you have to vote now, or like something really terrible will happen. You just need to have a very good mentality and ignore the super tense music, and instead just like pause. Or maybe it'll be nice for you to tell like Town to stop voting and think, because you have 60 seconds to make a decision on 2 hangs. It's definitely more than enough. So next, enough about voting. Let's talk about how to scum read and find evils. So I like to think of scum reading as 2 dimensions of logic or feeling. Personally, I've actually found like relying on feeling can sometimes be much more effective than relying on logic, but I think logic is very important to get down as basics. So how do you scum read someone logically? And I think logically, the main source of truth in a social deduction game is to read their votes. You can literally ignore their chat and whatever they say. For example, you realize that literally a fish is a coven member, and now you're going back to the previous day and looking at who voted innocent or guilty on literally a fish. You'll realize that people who vote innocent or abstain are more likely to be coven than people who vote guilty. This is because evils don't want to vote up other evils of the same faction. Coven members don't want to vote up or guilty other coven members. There's kind of 2 votes you can read also. The first vote is who votes someone up to the stand. So who are the votes who actually got this person to be on trial. And the second vote you can look at is whether someone votes guilty or innocent. I personally think the voting up someone up to a trial is even more telling than voting innocent or guilty, because voting someone up to trial is like you're kind of putting them up to judgment by the town, and you're kind of placing this person in the spotlight when you don't have to. Like you could divert the vote into someone else so that this person doesn't even have a chance of being hung. On the other hand, if you're voting innocent or guilty, town members are just saying guilty or innocent, then evils tend to go along with it, and it's a bit harder to tell things from the innocents or guilties unless the vote is really, really close. If the vote is really, really close, then you may be able to tell more from the innocent and guilties. Last tip about reading votes is I find that evils are just less inclined to vote in general, because really town is the only faction that's very pressured to vote. So if someone's just not voting, it's likely they're either AFK or evil. So next, let's talk about how do you scum read based on your feeling, which low-key I've been just more on the feeling and gut side of scum reading recently. And honestly, I feel like that sometimes works even better, because some players just have really bad voting histories, but for some reason you just kind of feel that they're town. So some behavioral signs that a player is town. I personally think if a player has a whole diary in the will, they're usually good. Like, most of the time this is because evil players don't really spend as much time making their will, like adding random thoughts into their will. Like an evil player's bodyguard will could just be night 1, 1, night 2, 2, night 3, 8, something like that. Or a town might say night 1, 1, night 2, 2, and then do parentheses, spy claim, or like something like that. They'll make their will just like, they'll just sprinkle in some extra information. And most of the time, the people who do sprinkle in these extra information do happen to be town. I think this is just because a town person is constantly thinking about what they're doing and their abilities and writing their will, whereas an evil person is just writing a will to fake something and to survive. Obviously, this is not to say that all town members should have a whole diary in their will. This is just some common signs I've been noticing. 2, I think a sign that a player is town is they have very strong opinions. Usually evils tend to be too scared to hard defend or hard push their fellow evil. So if you notice someone having a really strong opinion, then it's possible they're town. Even if they're wrong, you should kind of give them a second chance. Obviously, if they're wrong and have strong opinions on an obvious scum or obvious evil, and they're hard defending like evil and acting really crazy. They could be like a jester role, or they could just be evil. Like having strong opinions, this is concerning reasonable opinions that a town could think. Another thing I noticed is town is not too desperate about staying alive, because if them dying can prove something and help townies find more evils, they're usually not too desperate about, oh, I have to be alive. And a fourth sign that I think a player's town is they have a good story. Like if they're able to recount their feeling of getting this role, like let's say I've gotten coroner for the 4th time today, or like, oh, night 1 I bugged this person, and then they have a very elaborate and good story. This can show through either their results and their wills, or either through just their articulation of their thoughts. I would say then they're most likely town. Obviously, this is purely feeling and emotion based, and purely from my own experience, and I'm also just not telling people, oh, you should keep a whole diary in your will and you should have strong opinions. It's just these are some signs I've noticed that kind of distinguishes a player and makes them more obviously town from my perspective when it comes to scum reading, and using those feelings to kind of counter-induce and find who's evil. Yeah, I hope I explained that well. Okay, so now we finished scum reading. Let's go to the next section, which is defending yourself, because obviously as town, we don't want to die in the daytime. Dying in the daytime should be for evils only. If, let's say, you are hard accused, there's an executioner or some evil faction rule who is saying you were suspicious or saying you killed the person who died, then post your full will and full claim. You should state why you're innocent. So let's say you guiltied a coven member a day ago and the votes were really close. So you should be innocent, because if not, then why would you guilty? Just state passionately why you're innocent. And then state why you think the accuser is evil. This part is harder if it's just day 2 and there's like not really any leads to say, oh, this person must be evil. But if it's later in the game and there are some signs that the accuser is evil, like the accuser had not posted until day 3, and only until day 3 are they actively posting and only pushing you, that's kind of suspicious, right? Because they should have posted day 2. Or this accuser had previously innocented a coven member, or they had not really participated in any conversation until now. To be honest, I would just say if you're passionate and genuine as a town role, then town will normally trust you and you will not be lynched. After all, you are a member of the town and you're not really faking anything, you're just stating your case. I think you should be okay. Now, there's the other side where it's not a hard accuse on you, but there's just a slight suspicion on you. People are trying to think of who to vote. There's a little bit of sus on you, but there's also some sus on other people. You should find another player who you are suspicious of, so you can give town another target to point to. So you should look at people who are quiet or have a weak claim. For example, let's say there's a town investigative claim who stopped posting their will. They posted actively on day 2 and day 3, but they completely stopped posting on day 4 and day 5. That's very suspicious. A town protective claim who's not on the dead town power. Let's say the marshal already revealed and everyone knows that they're the town power. But this TP claim is somehow not on the town power and the town power died. That's very suspicious as a TP. Throw sus on the people you're suspicious of so you can point town in that target so that you're not under the spotlight yet and you don't have to receive the heat. And most likely, people who you're suspicious of are probably evil. Now let's talk about fake claiming. This is interesting. So here's the question. Should you fake claim as town in Town of Salem 2? I would say no, most of the time. So in a town majority, when town has enough votes, I don't think town should really fake claim. Especially, town investigatives should just not fake claim because their information is pretty important and town kind of relies on your information to understand the situation. Most other roles also don't need to fake claim either. Maybe Vet could fake claim if they have something clever. The only other town alignment that I think should probably fake claim to avoid getting guessed or conjured by the conjurer is the town power alignment. Because town power alignment, like the jailer, marshal, if you let them live until the late game, they're very powerful. TP is the best fake claim, and then TK, TS, and TI. I personally think TP is the best fake claim because usually you just say TP and then town ignores you, and you really don't have to produce a will. You can focus more on scum reading and who you want to use that town power on. So if you're a jailer, you can claim TP, and you can more so focus on figuring out who you want to jail and execute rather than writing a fake will. I think TK and TS are a bit more risky fake claims because a witch might want to witch a TK claim to see if they're the vigilante. TS, really, there's only so much roles that are TS. It's only really the retributionist, amnesiac, socialite, admirer, like those types of roles. And I think those need more effort to fake claim than just saying TP. My personal opinion, of course. So now if evil have majority, then I feel like it's more free real estate. I mean, if evils have votes, it's most likely GG for town, and town is most likely not going to win. If there are multiple evil factions, I think you still don't technically need to fake claim as town because they'll likely try to vote each other out rather than vote town out anyways. But this is situation dependent. Like if there's some situation where you claiming executioner or you claiming some role will really help you stay alive, then fake claiming as town could be a good call. Lastly, we've covered a lot. Okay. Lastly is just mini UI tips. So you can do the @ sign, like here. You can do this @ sign to @ a player, and that will ping them in the chat so that it is more clear and they'll respond to your message. I think as town, I recommend pinging people because there's just so much chat to get through, and as town, you want information to transfer as quickly as possible. For role info shortcut, for example, you can do : for abilities and hashtag for roles. So here, basically, when I'm writing my will, if I do :s, then I can do like, oh, whoops. Okay, I can do :s, and then I can pick the ability I'm looking for. If there's a newer player, then they can hover over that role or ability to see more information about what it actually means. And with so many roles and so many abilities, these are really helpful. And additionally, it's also just color coordination, and it makes the chat a little bit more readable. Otherwise, basically this is the end of the guide. Let me know if I missed anything because I've also just got into Town of Salem 2 and I've just tried to compile all the knowledge I've learned through my games. I mean, you literally can see when I started. So you can kind of grasp how I had been punished at the beginning from not knowing some of these metas to understanding more about them. And because now I understand them, I hope other people don't get punished by these hidden metas of the town. And I hope you guys can be great town members of the Town of Salem.